Hey everyone, this is Glenn Greenwald, and welcome to System Update on Rumble. As many of you know, System Update had been the name for the YouTube program that I had begun producing while at The Intercept, which was designed to be a 60 to 90 minute deep dive, almost like a documentary, into one particular topic, and then continued it once I left for Substack. And it's now going to be the brand for a much broader range of video journalism that we do here using Rumble as our base, but also publishing it on Substack as well. And what I wanted to do in this welcome introductory video is explain, number one, why I think this move can really supplement the journalism that I've been doing, what it is that I intend to do here. Number two, why I think it's so important, this move that not only I, but 6 or 7 other of the voices for whom I have the highest respect in journalism and culture and politics, who have also moved with me, why I think it's so important, not only for us, but for the broader cause of a free internet and for free discourse. And then finally, I want to take you through a Washington Post article that appeared this morning about the move that we made to Rumble and purported under the guise of news to report on this move and what Rumble is, because in this article, it's really quite extraordinary because it has virtually every standard tactic in the most vivid form I've seen, showing how the media regularly and deliberately and aggressively deceives and manipulates and propagandizes under the guise of reporting news. So I really want to take you step by step through that article. The Washington Post gave me the best present I could possibly hope for my debut here at Rumble, because it is the perfect case study for understanding why people rightly have lost so much trust and faith in the media. So to begin with, Rumble is, as many of you may not even have known, is essentially a competitor of YouTube. Although it's very different than YouTube in many ways. It was founded in 2013 by a Canadian liberal who had kind of an apolitical purpose, which was to provide a place for smaller content creators who were being abandoned by YouTube to be able to come and monetize their content, to find an audience. And over time, it became known for becoming as well a free speech venue where the moderation is very light and very faithful to the original rules, but also where they have taken a position that it's not up to them to arbitrate what is true and what is false. That is what free discourse and free debate is. And while they grew very rapidly from 2013 to 2019, they grew massively over the last year once people started realizing that one way to free yourself from the tyranny of Google's YouTube platform is to come here to Rumble, which is finding a larger and larger audience and at the same time guaranteeing people, just like Substack is doing in written form, that you can do your journalism and commentary and analysis and content creation without having to be captive to the censorious rules that are very arbitrary and increasingly repressive of Google executives or Facebook executives or other big tech monopolists. Now, one of the things I intend to do here is continue System Update in its original form. So once every other week or so, we are going to have a highly produced 60-minute style documentary on one particular issue that will enable us to delve deeply like we've been doing. But I also intend to do other things. There are times, for example, when I want to comment on or manifest on or analyze or dissect a particular story of the day and don't really think that it rises to the level of importance enough to justify, say, a 2,000-word edited article on Substack. But I also have more to say about it than, say, a Twitter thread would permit me to say. And so this is a perfect venue for me to be able to offer 5-minute commentary, 9-minute commentary on things of the day that I don't think warrants an article on Substack, but that I still think is important enough. It also enables us to reach a large audience of people who don't like to read long articles, but prefer to consume their news and analysis through video. And then for those of you who actually prefer text as opposed to video, especially for our longer videos, starting very shortly, we are going to be able to offer a transcript service so that people can read the videos that we do rather than having to go through them. You can see we've done a lot of work to upgrade our video setting. It will enable us to do a great deal of things We're not quite in the physical studio yet, which is going to be ready very shortly. It's soundproof. So for those of you who like hearing my dogs in videos, you have only maybe another week or so because we're going to be in a soundproof studio very shortly. We still have a couple of kinks to work out, but we're very excited about the system we created here and about the journalism that it's going to enable us to do. And then beyond all that, I also intend to have very regular, probably once every other week, live chats with my audience and my readers, where you'll have the ability to ask me questions, to raise issues, and we can have a much more interactive dialogue like we already have in the comment section at Substack, but it'll just provide another way of interacting with my audience, which I've always found to be one of the most important things about new media, is the fact that journalists can no longer simply speak from the mountaintop in monologue form, but are required to interact with their readers in dialogue form. So you have to confront criticisms that are in good faith, answer questions, and it's also an amazing resource when you have a good informed readership, as I do. So I'm really excited about everything that's to come. Now let me talk about why I think this is such an important cause. I'm moving with other people, including former Congresswoman and Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, who has moved along with me to Rumble, as well as the Joe Rogan favorite guest comedian Bridget Fetisi, a longtime colleague of mine, Zed Jelani, and his partner on Substack, Shant Mesrobian, a very popular pro-Bernie YouTuber named Matt Aralafa, who does amazingly talented videos, but has become increasingly censored on YouTube, and others as well. I'm really proud of the group we put together for this initial move, and there's going to be others coming as well. Why is it so important to have a video platform that genuinely believes in free speech for video makers the way that Substack does for writers? It's because big tech monopolists are becoming increasingly repressive almost by the week. It's really not an exaggeration to say. And it's not hard to understand why. When the first big censorship events and deplatforming and depersoning events happened back in 2015 with Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos, many of us warned that if you cheer those deplatformings because you dislike Alex Jones or Milo Yiannopoulos, what you're cheering for is a system that will inevitably expand to ultimately swallow and silence from the internet, not just the people you hate, but the people you like. And that's exactly what's happening. More and more, it's often arbitrary. Half the time, you don't even know why someone's been banished. It's just very Kafkaesque. One day they're there, the next day they're not. And other times, it's explicitly in order to do what the internet was designed to prevent, which is ensure that only official dogma and official decrees are heard and never dissidents. There was an amazing story just this week, in fact, just yesterday, that illustrates why I find it so crucial to support platforms like Rumble that offer free speech. It involves a really controversial censorship decision by YouTube. Here's an article from the New York Times with the headline that reads, YouTube suspends Rand Paul for a week over a video disputing the effectiveness of masks. Now, what's amazing about this video is two things. Number one, Rand Paul is not just a United States senator, which means that we ought to hear from our elected officials and their views of the most important debates, but he's also a medical doctor, which means he has far more expertise than, say, lots of pundits who appear on television frequently talking about COVID. And what's even more amazing about the fact that he was suspended from YouTube for quote-unquote disputing the effectiveness of masks is that he really didn't say anything more than what numerous other experts are saying. He was essentially saying, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but this was his position, that cloth masks, as opposed to, say, N95 surgical masks, don't provide very much protection at all from COVID. And it was in the context of the debate about whether governors should impose mask mandates, whether we should require children to go to school with cloth masks. And he was saying the benefits are very, very minimal. And he was suspended from YouTube on the grounds that this was disinformation. Now, what's amazing about it is a lot of things, including the fact, here's the article that says, quote, from the New York Times, YouTube on Tuesday removed a video by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky for the second time and suspended him from publishing for a week after he posted a video that disputed the effectiveness of wearing masks to limit the spread of the coronavirus. Now, this is what is so amazing to me is if you look here, That person who you see on that side of the screen is Michael Osterhelm, who's the director of infectious disease research and policy at the University of Minnesota. He's also an epidemiologist, and he was also handpicked by then President-elect Joe Biden to be his COVID advisor during the transition. So this is not a Trump public health official. This is a Biden public health official with every credential you could possibly want for somebody to opine on the various debates that we're having over COVID. And as you can see there, on August 3rd, he appeared on the PBS show with Christiane Amanpour and was interviewed by Walter Isaacson. And one of the things he was asked about, and then one of the things he said, was virtually identical to what Rand Paul said on his YouTube video that caused that video to be removed and him to be suspended. So let's just take a look at what Dr. Osterholm said about masks. Here's the full context of the quote, where he begins by saying, "I have had concerns," and it dates back to April of 2020, about the concept of masking. It's a political hot button. And then he says, "And yet at the same time, I think we've all done a disservice to the public. When you actually look at face cloth coverings, these cloth pieces of hang over your face, they actually only have very limited impact in reducing the amount of virus that you inhale in or exhale out. A very limited impact," he said, cloth masks have. He then went on to say, "I've been really disappointed with my colleagues in public health for not being more clear about what masking can or cannot do." This is Joe Biden's former COVID advisor, one of the nation's leading epidemiologists and experts in infectious diseases, saying what Senator Rand Paul, a medical doctor himself, said, which is that cloth masking provides extremely limited protection against COVID. Not none, but nowhere near, as he goes on to say, what N95 surgical masks provide. Something that I think we ought to know. How much protection are these cloth masks that we're encouraged to wear and increasingly being required to wear actually providing? That's a debate, of course, we ought to be having. And yet YouTube decided that that is not a debate that they will permit. They will permit nobody, not even a United States senator who's a medical doctor, to question or dissent from the orthodoxy of the CDC and Dr. Fauci. In fact, 2 days after that appearance on Christiane Amanpour's show, the same medical expert went on CNN and said something very similar about masks. He, on August 5th, appeared on CNN, and here's what he said.
We know today that many of the face cloth coverings that people wear are not very effective in reducing any of the virus movement in or out. Either you're breathing out or you're breathing in. And in fact, if you're in the upper Midwest right now, anybody who's wearing their face cloth covering can tell you they can smell all the smoke that we're still getting. We need to talk about better masking. We need to talk about it.
So he says it on PBS, masks, cloth masks provide very little protection. He goes on CNN and says the same thing there. And then Rand Paul goes on YouTube and says essentially the same thing. And he's kicked off YouTube for a week or 10 days, and the video is removed. Now, the reality is the second video that Rand Paul made, in which he talked again about masks that led to that suspension, was one in which he was so angry because his first video had been removed that he repeatedly encouraged people who currently watch videos on YouTube to instead come and watch them on Rumble. So whether that was the real reason YouTube suspended him, because he was using their platform to promote Rumble, or whether it was because he was saying something that, although contrary to what the CDC and Dr. Fauci say, is nonetheless obviously supported by the highest credentialed scientists. Either way, it shows you how incredibly repressive Google's YouTube has become in terms of trying to police and manipulate and shape our discourse as opposed to providing free debate. And things like this, which have happened over and over and over, is the reason I not only decided to come to Rumble, but put together a group of people to come with me, and will continue to, because it's not enough to just report on and denounce censorship by big tech monopolies and the destruction of a free internet, as I've been doing. We have to support and enlarge and empower the platforms that are actually standing for free speech and defending them, like Substack and like Rumble. And Rumble's not the only video, there are others as well, but Rumble is one that I really believe is here for the long haul, is growing massively. And so I'm really excited to be here and to be a part of what they're trying to build, which is a non-ideological and apolitical site whose value is not conservatism or liberalism or right or left or attachment to any particular political party, but a guarantee of free discourse and free speech for everyone. Now, let's look at this Washington Post article that I talked about at the beginning and I find so fascinating, because the attempt by the Washington Post to demonize Rumble right at this important moment is so revealing of so many things. So let's just start with the headline. You can see there's the article. The headline originally had been Rumble to pay Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi Gabbard and other creators to come there. And at the last minute, they changed it to Rumble, a YouTube rival popular with conservatives, will pay creators who, quote, challenge the status quo. And then the subheadline says, listen to this. This is the subheadline of what is not an op-ed, but a news article. The video site has exploded during the pandemic as a home for anti-vaccine misinformation and conservative complaints about big tech censorship. So you see that before you even have begun the article, the Washington Post is telling you this is a site for disinformation, to mislead the public, to deceive the public, to harm the public. They're signaling to you this website, this platform is one that you should hate. And it's not just disinformation, but it's for right-wing disinformation. So before you even get to this news article, they're already putting into your brain the fact that this is a harmful presence in society. That's how they function. Now, there are a lot of other ways you could do an actually neutral, fair headline. Here's one that reported on Rumble from the Canadian site The Conversation back in July that just says, meet Rumble, Canada's new free speech platform, and its impact on the fight against online misinformation. So it raises the issue about whether or not it is eating misinformation with its free speech, but it's also calling it a free speech platform, letting you decide how you want to see it instead of this heavy-handed approach by the Washington Post to make you try and hate Rumble. So now let's look at the article itself, because it really just one passage after the next is amazing to show how it is that they function. So it's almost like every paragraph is designed to make you hate Rumble and believe that it is nothing more than a sewer of disinformation over and over. It begins by saying it's a fast-growing YouTube rival, popular with conservative influencers. But then it goes on to say, Rumble has emerged over the last year as one of the most prominent video sites for right-wing viewers and provocateurs, and it is seeking to bolster its image as a new online home for those who claim they've been censored by big tech. It then goes on to describe the move that we made today, myself and Tulsi Gabbard and Bridget Fetisi, Zed Jelani, and others, as, quote, Rumble's move highlights how a growing group of online influencers have amassed lucrative followings while discussing their alleged suppression in books, videos, social media posts, podcasts, newsletters, promotional sponsorships, speaking events, and other marketing opportunities. Gabbard and Greenwald have expanded their fan base in recent months by criticizing what they call overly aggressive media censorship in appearances on Fox News and Twitter, where each has more than 1 million followers. Now, what they're trying to do there is to say essentially that we're preposterous hypocrites because we're claiming that we're victims of censorship when in reality, we're actually not. Now, the reason that's so deceitful is that I certainly don't claim to be a victim of censorship. I don't claim to be a victim of online repression, nor have I ever heard Tulsi Gabbard claim to be a victim in any way. So this whole narrative that they're building, oh, look, they're crying that they're and whining that they're canceled, people who are being censored even though they have 1 million followers on Twitter and get to go on Fox News and is a complete fraud. It's not what we claim. I don't denounce online censorship because I've been victimized by it. Apparently, the Washington Post doesn't understand that you can denounce injustices and dangerous trends in the world without yourself having been victimized by it. I don't think I've ever been censored by social media in my life. Or there may have been one very trivial time when someone said something about my family and I responded in a very angry way, threatening violence, and I was suspended for Twitter by Twitter for 12 hours until it was removed. But in general, that's not what I claim. And it's not what Tulsi Gabbard claims. And it's not what any of us who have moved there claim. That's an invented narrative by the Washington Post to say these people are hypocrites. They whine that they're victims of censorship when in reality, they're not. We do denounce online censorship because of the way in which others have been silenced. Maybe one day we will be, but that's not actually our complaint. Now, let's continue looking at this article. This is where they really try and make you think that Rumble is a dangerous entity. It describes how YouTube has a medical misinformation policy since last May in which they banned videos about the coronavirus that could pose a, quote, serious risk of egregious harm. There you see a little typo where they have 4 coronavirus falsehoods, and I guess their extremely rigorous editorial scrutiny process didn't catch it. And then the last paragraph says, Rumble has avoided these debates by allowing such videos to remain on the site unmoderated. Pavlovsky, who's the founder and CEO of Rumble, said the company employs 40 content moderators to police the site, slightly more than one moderator per every million users. Over and over and over again, these media outlets equate free speech, allowing people to be heard, to express their views, with danger, with immorality. It's implicit in every sentence. YouTube, they say, is censoring, but probably not enough, but at least they're censoring more than Rumble, which is therefore dangerous because they're allowing unfettered and insufficiently controlled conversations. That is absolutely the primary theme of the corporate media, as I've said many times. It's amazing that the leading advocates for online censorship, for the destruction of a free internet in the United States, are not government agencies or intelligence community services, but are journalists themselves, in part because they're afraid of losing control over the dialogue and the discourse as more and more people turn away from them for things like this, but also because they really do believe that only they are entitled, that only they have the sufficient responsibility to be heard. We go on to this next passage here in which they say, the site bans racism and hate speech, but it's contrasted itself with the Google-owned YouTube by refusing to remove, quote, medical misinformation, including those casting doubt on vaccines during a pandemic that is surging in many states and has killed more than 4 million people around the world. Obviously trying to get you to believe that Rumble has played a role in directly killing people. Why? Because they don't believe that they should be the arbiters of truth and falsity about extremely complex scientific debates about a new virus that, even as I showed you earlier, the highest credentialed experts can't agree amongst themselves on the basics. So the Washington Post is trying to tell you that any site that doesn't deem itself competent to decide truth and falsity and police our discourse accordingly has blood on its hands. Over and over, that's the formula that they use. Now, here's just a kind of small and gratuitous, yet nonetheless revealing passage. Congressman Matt Gaetz, a Florida Republican now under investigation for possible sex trafficking of a minor, said in his a tweet this week that Rumble is his, quote, new favorite social media app and the best way to watch his new video. Why put that in there? It's only to try and tell you that Rumble is so bad that even pedophiles like Matt Gaetz love it. Now, the reason why that's so repugnant is multifold, including the fact that while there was a leak to the New York Times that Matt Gaetz was being investigated for a variety of potential crimes, he has never been charged with any crime, let alone convicted of any crime. So to just throw in there that Congressman Gaetz is linked to the possible sex trafficking of a minor in a newspaper when no authorities have accused him of doing that is grotesque. But it's even worse because the only reason to include this passage is to try and link this site that they're trying to demonize with pedophilia and sex trafficking of minors. I mean, could it be any clearer? This is a news article. If they have an agenda in every paragraph that becomes incredibly apparent as you see it. Now, what's behind this agenda beyond what I said? Here in this paragraph, we actually can see it. It's the massive growth of Rumble in ways that are outpacing even the Washington Post. It says here, Rumble has grown from 1 million active users last summer to roughly 30 million, so a 30-fold increase in a very short period of time, and its traffic has exploded according to data shared with the Washington Post by the analytics firm SimilarWeb. Visits in the U.S. to the site grew from about 200,000 in the last week of July 2020, so about a year ago, from 200,000 just a year ago to nearly 19 million last week, a 9,000% increase. Is it any wonder why the Washington Post wants to convince you that Rumble is this grave danger and menace to the world because they allow for free speech? Because they know they're losing their audience. They know people don't trust them any longer. As these sites explode in growth, they get more and more desperate to smear and discredit anybody who might be a competitor of theirs or offer the ability to challenge their orthodoxies and their stranglehold over the discourse, which is why I found this article so revealing. Now, everything I've said so far doesn't even come close to the most amazing part of this article, the worst part of this article, the part that really shows how rotted and corrupted the corporate press is. Let me show you what they did here. So they don't like to offer their own opinions. They like to pretend that they find objective experts who have no vested interest in the debate in order to air the views that they actually want to air, the Washington Post, but don't want you to think they themselves are airing. So they find an expert, and they go through a bunch of them until they find the one that says what they want. And then they present this expert to you as though this is someone who just is like a scholar. They have no vested interest one way or the other. There's someone who studies this and therefore are very, very reliable. So they say, quote, some researchers expect that Rumble's lax rules for moderating content will force it down the same path of previous free speech startups, fueling an echo chamber that further entrenches the most extreme corners of its user base while also limiting its ability to win mainstream viewers. So any site that offers free speech, according to researchers, is going to run into this problem of just being an echo chamber of fanaticism. Who is the expert that they got to say this? His name, or her name, I'm not sure, is Ciaran O'Connor, an analyst with the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Doesn't that sound very benign, very objective and nonpartisan? The Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Who could be against researchers and scholars who simply are working to ensure strategic dialogue? They do go on to say that this group is based in London and is an extremism think tank, and they have worked with Google in the past on targeting hate speech. That's all that they tell you about this group. And then have this expert from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue go on to say, Rumble has, quote, become one of the main platforms for conspiracy communities and far-right communities in the U.S. and around the world. So the main person they got to trash Rumble as a shitty site filled with right-wing extremism and disinformation is a quote-unquote researcher with the Institute for Strategic Dialogue that you know nothing about from this article other than the fact that they're an anti-extremism think tank based in London who has worked in the past with Google to target hate speech. So important is that expert, the only one they cite, that the entire last section of the Washington Post article on our move to Rumble and on what Rumble is devoted exclusively to that person's quotes about why Rumble is so bad. Now, that's how the article ends, by their expert opining over and over and over that you shouldn't trust Rumble. Rumble is a menace to society. Rumble is a danger. And that's an expert opinion. So that's the news doing its job. They find experts, and the experts who study this stuff tell you what you should think, tell you what to believe. Let's take a look at what this organization actually is, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. I find this incredible what they did here. So this is from their website. It's from their About Us page. It's the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. There you see it, About Us. And they say, who are we? And according to their own description, they say they've been at the forefront of analyzing and responding to extremism in all its forms since 2006. And they partner with governments, cities, businesses, and communities. Well, that sounds a little bit suspicious already, that the source the Washington Post has anointed to tell you which sites to trust and don't are ones that work with governments. Though it's still a pretty benign and generic description, you'd have to dig a little bit deeper to find out like exactly which governments do they work with and which businesses are they in partnership with and what is the nature of those. So if you dig further into their own website, they have a section called Partnership and Funders. The people actually give them money. That seems like an important thing to know. The Washington Post apparently didn't think it was important to tell you this because they didn't. But I looked, and you'll be amazed by what I found. Here are some of their partners and funders. First, we have here the United Kingdom National Security State. Various agencies within the national security apparatus of the United Kingdom, including the Counterterrorism Office. That's part of who funds them or who partners with them to decide what is extreme. And then what do we have here? The U.S. State Department and the U.S. Department for Homeland Security. That's another one of their partners or funders. Don't you kind of wish that you had known that the expert that the Washington Post presented to you as the objective, nonpartisan, no skin in the game expert to opine on which sites to trust and not to trust, partner with or are funded by the national security state of the United States, Great Britain, and multiple other NATO companies? But here's the even more amazing thing. They have private sector partners and funders as well, and you'll never guess who that includes. Facebook, Google, Google.org, Microsoft, and YouTube. This is a group that is partnered with and funded by Rumble's principal competitor. That's who the Washington Post got you to read. Trashing Rumble is a person who is funded by and partners with the big tech monopolies, including Rumble's principal competitor. Now, the Washington Post believes, apparently, that funding is very important for you to know about when judging a site because they did go out of their way to say who Rumble's latest investors were, including Peter Thiel and a venture fund with which J.D. Vance had in the past been associated. So they apparently believe, now those Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance had nothing to do with the founding of Rumble back in 2013. They have nothing to do with its governance. They're just people who see its growth and invested in it. J.D. Vance didn't, but Peter Thiel did. They have nothing to do with the governance, but the Washington Post thought that was really important for you to know who's investing in Rumble so you can assess what you think about it. How come the Washington Post didn't think it was important for you to know who funds and partners with their primary expert who created the whole last part of their article trashing Rumble as a site that is dangerous and that you can't trust, especially given that their partners and funders are the very big tech monopolies and competitors that Rumble is designed to counteract. You see how they hid that from you, the Washington Post? A newspaper which, by the way, themselves are owned and funded by the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, who has warehouses all over the world in which workers work with no benefits for $7.50 an hour and are not allowed to leave their desk and have to urinate into bottles because they can't go to the bathroom for too long without being penalized. This is the kind of thing that these media outlets do. Do you trust a media outlet that hides that from you? That presents this guy as an expert without telling you what in 2 seconds I found right on the organization site? Just digging a little bit more into this group and what they say they are. One of the partners is the United States Institute of Peace. That sounds like a really nice, benign site. But if you look at their site, they say they're a site that is, quote, founded by Congress. And they, too, work with governments. And the United States Institute of Peace, one of that group's primary funders and partners, has as their main goal, quote, advancing peace and U.S. national security. So all of these extremism groups, they're funded by George Soros as well. They're funded by Pierre Omidyar as well. They're funded by the Marshall Project, and all of these quote unquote pro-democracy. It's the same people over and over who are attempting to shape what discourse is permitted in the name of fighting disinformation. That's what the Washington Post did with its article. Paragraph after paragraph, implicitly equating free speech with danger, claiming that the people who just moved to Rumble are hypocrites because we claim we're victims of censorship, while at the same time having large platforms, when in fact we've never claimed that, a complete fabrication. And worst of all, presenting as an expert, the crux of their news article, somebody who could not be any more financially interested and invested in the very debate that they asked him to opine on, while concealing and hiding from you who that person actually is. Now, I have to say, when I read this Washington Post article, and even now, I'm not even angry about it. It's not like I think this is some extraordinary, exceptional, aberrational journalism crime that they committed. It's the opposite. It's every article practically from the corporate press does this. Starting from the headline, where they already tried to poison you against this new site by telling you that it's a home for anti-vaccine misinformation, claiming that they kill people, paragraph after paragraph, making you think that it's just a place not for free speech or free discourse, but to kill people with disinformation, and then concluding with an expert that they basically lied about in terms of who his identity was and what he actually does for his work. The entire article is a case study in how these corporate outlets pretend that they're reporting the news while constantly pushing a very self-interested, ideologically skewed agenda designed to deceive and manipulate the public and do everything but inform them. And that is why they not only have lost the faith of the public, but deserve to lose the faith of the public. And it's also why I am incredibly excited by this new project, by the opportunities that we have here. Everyone who is already a subscriber to my Substack will have free and complete access to all of the content here. I look really forward to exploring how we can use this site to further journalism, to give platforms to people who deserve to be heard. It's an exploding site in terms of size. The audience we can reach is in the many of millions of people, including people we couldn't previously reach before. That's why we're here. That's why we move with so many great people, and we're going to continue to encourage people to come here. So welcome to the Rumble version of System Update, and I really appreciate your listening to this welcome video.